G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day, and so far you've had a fantastic start to the week. At least I hope it was better than my end of last week, beginning of this week. Of course, those who follow me will know last week I was doing chemotherapy. I was under my 4th round of that chemo. I went into the chemo clinic on Friday for some fluids and drugs and basically presented there and had a bit of a fall actually, that ended up actually then being admitted into the chemo ward for a couple of nights just of how unwell I was. It was absolutely horrible, and I still have not fully recovered. It takes me a long time to fully recover. So if I get a little bit like milky in my head or forget where things are, you're just going to have to deal with it, but it will improve quickly and then very slowly. My head is still spinning today. And then I got out of the hospital on Sunday, around midday, and about an hour later, maybe an hour and a quarter later, I had a reaction to one of the drugs they gave me upon exiting the hospital. So then I had to go back in through the emergency department, get a shot of my arm and whatever else. So rough weekend for Willie. And even rougher, well, it was my 29th birthday yesterday, and let's say there wasn't much celebrations, but everyone who reached out, sent me a happy birthday, sent their well wishes, they knew I was unwell. Look, thank you so much. I know YouTubers and everyone's like, thank you. That realistically, the amount you guys have done for me is so much, I can never repay you. So thank you, I guess, for all of that and knowing that people still cared out there. But if, missing that birthday, if you'd like to buy me a beer for my birthday, there are some links below that I'll leave there. Now, legends, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the maps. We're going to talk about Kursk. We're going to look at a tunnel operation that has made this possible. We need to look at Europe slipping further into authoritarianism while trying to fight authoritarianism with what has happened in Romania with Calin Georgescu. And of course, we'll look at geolocations and we will compare maps. We've got a fair bit to go over, but I don't want to be here for too long today. So we have been saying for weeks that the amount of attacks with drones, with Iskanders, with FABs, all of that has increased dramatically around Kursk. Now, mainly those drones and the Iskanders, they have been focused on logistics and, of course, handover, takeover of units and weapons. They're operating both in Kursk, where Ukraine occupy, and in Sumy. We have said that this is very dangerous because there's not many ways to get in and out of here. And, of course, now we have seen a huge uptick in this. This is why from day one, we have said this is not advantageous terrain. You don't hold disadvantageous terrain just because it creates good PR. That's why you do raids. And unlike my tumour, well, Kursk, they're reacting to the attack and decreasing in size. So let's actually have a look at this. So where we are talking here is, of course, Ukraine on a map, the capital of Kyiv. Red areas occupies since 22, the purple since 2014. We're going to go over the rest of the maps, but we're talking up here around Kursk. Now, sadly, this map doesn't show where the Russians were at some points, but I can show you a roundabout. So let's just go back to when I last spoke to you, which was the 6th. We see Kursk looking like this at some 350.6 square kilometres, and then we come to today, it's down at 288. So you can see that is a hell of a lot of territory has come under control, although it doesn't show it on this map, as you can see. But there are some problems where you see in the direction of where the Russians are attacking and cutting off some service roads as well and moving closer to this main service route, this MSR. This is what we have been speaking about. Now, Ukraine cannot afford to take huge further losses here in Kursk. To try and suggest that the loss ratio in Kursk after that initial weeks was in Ukraine's favour, I believe if people are still upholding that, they are a fool. They don't understand being surrounded on three sides by a superior artillery force where your logistics getting smashed going in. They take maybe the first few weeks, but after that, I wouldn't believe it. And today is no different. The amount of footage we're seeing of elements being taken out here. And these roads under pretty much effective fire control at this point. So let's then talk about the operation that made some of this possible. Now, there's a little bit in this as far as some are saying that they fully got taken out. Others are saying it was a success. What we know is the border moved and the footage off the GoPros of the guys was uploaded by Russian pages. So at least some of it then came back. And of course, this is what I'm talking about. You've probably seen this now famous photograph of this Russian Special Forces soldier here in some sort of like self-contained breathing apparatus because of these tunnels. They've managed to break here by using large gas pipes. This is actually part of the same then gas pipeline system that Ukraine turned off when they went into Kursk, that of course feeds into Eastern Europe. So we saw photos of this operation here. Now the claims are that this was not successful. Well, obviously it had some success because we saw the front line move, and it's also all the Russian photos are being uploaded by Russia. If it was Ukraine uploading the footage going, look at what happened, maybe, but all the videos being uploaded by them. So it's as with everything in this war, it seems to be halfway. Did they take losses? Yeah. And did they get some ground? Yeah. So it's always probably halfway between where two sides of the aisle are screaming at each other. What a surprise. But let's have a look at actually where this went. So this is then Kursk here, in through the pipeline right up into the outskirts here. And I'll show you some geolocations later on. But Kursk, Sudzha is in real trouble. But sadly, we see things like this, because this is Ausint Defender, I believe, was one of the best reporters online, but is just taking at this point, I don't know why, not being more critical of this, that these numbers as fact. 80 and 100 Russian Special Forces operators were eliminated earlier in Kursk after attempting to infiltrate. But the footage and whatever we saw was from that side. So it's moving to like the official narratives as that narrative sort of gets squeezed down to what it is before negotiations. Remember, this is an informational war, and Kursk is Ukraine's golden goose, and it is for the informational aspect, for the embarrassment, for the propaganda, whatever. Kursk is Ukraine's golden egg. Golden goose, sorry. The problem is that if Russia don't believe that, just take it back militarily, it's going to be even more tough when it comes time for negotiation. So let's talk about Kursk a little bit further on. Now, of course, Chief of the Armed Forces, Commander Shursky, he has said this on his Facebook. I work in the operational zone of grouping of Kursk. The border of Sumy and Kursk Oblasts of the Russian Federation are under control of the Defence Force of Ukraine, despite engaging a significant number of Russian troops reinforced by North Korean infantry in offensive action. So the North Koreans are apparently there again, the ghost of Pyongyang. The enemy suffers significant losses in live force and equipment. Of course, with this, people always forget that, well, there's going to be huge losses everywhere in here. And like I said, I believe you honestly believe the ratio is anything more than 1-to-1 in Kursk, as far as not in Russia's favour. Have a look at the ground and have a look at the videos of equipment getting taken out. Separate DRG, so these are reconnaissance teams, and small infantry groups of the enemy trying to infiltrate the territory of Ukraine and destroyed by firearms and our troops. At present, there are no threats surrounding our units in the Kursk region. We've heard this all before. Units are taking timely measures to manoeuvre on the advantageous border of defence. So again, it's no threat to being surrounded in here, and I'm telling you that in my personal opinion right now, I believe this whole group is strategically surrounded. By this road being completely under completely under direct fire and indirect fire, this is a real problem. Now, DF can also just mean drones, but again, they are hitting there and causing massive problems. But we'll also hear things like this off Mr. David D., who I believe used to work in intelligence at some point. Ukraine was ready for both actions, of course, of the attacks that have occurred, and they've both failed from reports, with Russia taking large losses. That's what Kursk is all about, forcing Russia to do stupid things and drive up their KIA numbers. Please listen to me, have faith. Again, though, this is the thing, is the goalposts of what Kursk was for have forever just been shifting around. That at one time it was probably for the nuclear power plant in Kursk, and then it was probably more, and now it's just to drive up the KIA. And what I'm saying is, by holding on to this and not withdrawing early, there's no way the ratio is as people will say. Like we say, Kursk is under serious threat. Once Russia announced that it would be taken back militarily and not negotiated, it's lost its strategic value. That was the strategic value, because it was a card for swap. But Russia's going, no, we'll mobilise what we need to push it out. The issue is, though, if Ukraine do choose to actually can withdraw out of here, it's going to be costly. The issue is what's stopping Russia playing reverse card and just moving in and having then a Sumy buffer zone. And that would be catastrophic, knowing where the negotiations are with, of course, the President of America, Donald Trump. So again, we will see in here, but from the amount of equipment being taken out, and I'll just show you then some pieces like this. So when we have just in here, just right in the center of Suja, we have a Ukrainian column here getting struck by Russian drone. So we see this in here. Now I can't show you this whole thing, but is bombed, is taken out. That entire convoy was taken out there. And then we actually have, you can see the freedom of drone use over here. This is further footage from a Russian drone of the amount of destruction that had then taken place in here. So do not underestimate how dire this situation has got very, very quickly. Now, we have a couple of geolocations for you. So in the north here, we look at this first geolocation, which sits just outside of the grey zone on this map though, but when we go back, it was well inside. So we're going just here. And then we have this piece of footage here of then these Russian forces flying then unit and Russian national flags as well on top of there, so we can confirm they have then taken that area. But then this next geolocation, this is one that should be of concern. So what we're looking for is it's like a big shed. I think this is a shed and then this waterway. So it's right on the outskirts of here, which is far beyond where the map is sitting today. I believe some 5.5 kilometres. Yes, some 5 kilometres back. There's then this footage. I don't know what these gentlemen are saying. This footage of Russian soldiers that has been geolocated to there as well. So real problem developing in here. In my opinion, it's been a real problem for a long time. And I think that the West and Ukrainian advisors didn't know how to get out of here due to the PR value. The problem is in this, and the reason Ukraine cannot afford this, if there's a level of surrounding in here or huge losses withdrawing out of here, Ukraine do not have the reserve to backfill that. That is what I've been speaking about. You have heard me say for months. The way that we're going to see this like flip on its head and things change overnight is if Russia or Ukraine have a large amount of soldiers cut off somewhere. What we know in here is some of Ukraine's best soldiers and their best equipment is all in here. And the loss of this won't have the PR value because the West just won't report on it. But still, it will be a lot and another card off the table. So let's have a look at how this unfolds with Syriac maps. So saying that both on the western and eastern side, further pushing, especially down in here, this isn't then reported on this map. I think it will trickle feed in some of this. Then we get the next at 1,110, see all over the north. And this is where then the Russians pushed in on this the pipeline. So absolutely, that wasn't just, it doesn't seem like it was a waste because it's been able to break through as long as victories aren't Pyrrhic. And then we see that further right on the outskirts here, including where those geolocations I showed you were, large amounts, and it is slowly but surely getting crushed, and it has sped up a hell of a lot in the past few days. And this is the most recent map from Syriac. Situation Kursk front, Russian army recaptured completely the localities of these and made series of advancements in Malalochnia. In addition, Russian forces continue increasing the gains west of Kurilyovka, so both in the eastern and then the northwestern too. So this is a real problem that is developing here, and this is the worst case, well, two worst case scenarios here. Is firstly, the Russians don't bother pushing for the road inside of Kursk. They go where they've got this prong down to the border, as well as this prong just to the west where they've seen it, and they'd moved further to try and cut this off. Anyway, what we need to look at is this is already under strategic encirclement due to the amount of drones and munitions that can land here and artillery, but getting closer and closer, or maybe a physical encirclement, big problem. But the worst case, the even worst case scenario again, is it remains somewhat open that a stream, just a trickle of equipment can go into Kursk, and the Russians are feeding sort of that by not shelling it. So as Ukraine deploy more and more forces in here, not wanting to lose it, then you increase how tight your grip on this is, potentially having either a larger surrender or a larger kill box as well. So again, we will see in here, but what we have seen is this. We've seen the command say there's no threat here. We've seen the command say that before. I think there's a real threat of either from Sverdlikovo and from Guevo up, cutting off this road, or cutting off this road actually inside of Ukraine. We already know where the drones and everything sits in there, as I showed you with that drone footage of that convoy being taken out. We're seeing some footage that is very reminiscent of earlier in this war. So keep an eye on this front line. Now, before we talk maps further, I just want to talk Romania and politics. I'm not going to go too deep into politics today. My brain's hurting me too much, but protests erupted in downtown Bucharest following the Central Electoral Bureau's decision to ban Russian-backed far-right politician Khalid Georgescu from running in the upcoming rerun presidential elections. What I'll say is allegedly, and that allegedly is a few $100,000, which realistically, if that's what is going to underpin the democracy here, I agree with JD Vance that it mustn't have been that strong anyway. Georgescu, who's openly supported by the Russian US administrations, said this was a direct hit to democracy. Again, the US administration, they are not going to like this right when the EU need to build some relationships back with the US. And this is all I see. It's fighting authoritarianism with authoritarianism, and you are leaning into a total democracy where you can believe what you want, but anything other than what we believe and what the media stated narrative and the government's narrative is, anything other than that you are then an enemy and you don't believe in democracy. Again, democracy works best when it's something you don't like, I guess, and you continue to follow it. So, whoever gets voted in a couple of weeks' time in Australia, I'll accept it because that's democracy. I won't go around saying it's not undemocratic because the person I didn't want to get in didn't get in. And I believe this is just further European woke imperialism, that anyone with alternative views away from the sort of central EU countries' view of the world is then seen as a threat, seen as an attack on your values, and therefore their values need to shift. And this rift will come massive after this war between Ukraine and the EU, Poland and the EU, Romania and the EU, and those eastern, more conservative states. It's going to actually be very interesting because Ukraine is a very, very conservative country. Don't take into account the flag wavers on Twitter as then the country is. No, Ukraine is a very religious, very conservative country, and there's going to be very interesting when there's a talk about like refugees and immigration to try and backfill numbers in here as well. So let's jump back onto the maps and we'll move our way down towards Pokrovsk. So of course we have the eastern side of Pokrovsk near this Badanivka intersection, and then the western side where we've seen Ukraine have some localized gains in the past week. So let's open up this, and we do have a little bit of footage here and some maps. So same area around then, just to the west of Pishani and Kotliny, that Ukraine made some more gains at the top Kotliny around here, Pishani as well. This is catching up, I believe, on some of the gains we saw on this. Further movements around Dashne as well, or Udashne. And then we need to come to the east, and we'll talk about this intersection, of course, that is very, very critical, but just out to the north of Badanivka. So up in this direction here, that Russia made some ground, but not, of course, being shown on this map today. And then I want to come down to our next geolocation. Of course, we have Konstantinopel and Rivkia. This was the Kudakov pocket at one point in time. We see this geolocation here is as close as I could get it, so right on the outskirts of the grey here. We then see Russians flying flags here and claiming that all of Constantinople has come under then Russian control. We look on this map, it does show just some red movement out from Ulaki in the direction of Constantinople, but not the amount that we are expecting to see with that geolocation, Ternopil and Rivkia, and this map was in the wrong area, but Syriac, he's showing that this has filled in between these locations. Then we come down into Velyka Novosilka. There has been a number of movements around here. Let's firstly bring up the first Syriac map. So he's showing the whole way from where Constantinople and Rivkia front is right up here. So this is in this direction, all the way down past Rozliv and outwards from Velyka Novosilka, which sits at this dot here, that there's been numerous Russian advances along these roads. Then just north of Velyka Novosilka, the day later, Ukraine took back and recaptured some series of positions. So let's move into then our last folder, and we'll be up and down the map a little bit, but bear with me. So the first place I want to come is actually into Toretsk. Now, no changes shown on this map. Again, it's almost impossible to know what exactly is happening in Toretsk. But we can see by Syriac that there was large attacks and have taken back about 20% of Toretsk from being occupied at one point, which the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation had claimed that Toretsk was occupied. We believe that Toretsk probably was occupied, but they didn't have time to dig in, and therefore was an opportunity to then push them further out. So let's continue moving our way up, and we'll come just to the north of here. Of course, we'll come to Chassiv Yar, which I'm sure you are all familiar with. And then we see in these blocks out to the north. We see the further control through these and pushing down to the south. Again, the fight for Chassif Yar has been going and raging for months and months. It is looking like it's coming to an end, but it could be a cascade, because once Chassif Yar comes under control, potentially Toretsk, we may see things speed up much quicker from there. Now, let's keep moving our way up, and then we have Bilohorivka, the quarry in here, of course, still missing where the geolocation showed last week movements, right where my cursor is here. And we see then the Syriac map showing movement on the north side of the quarry and on the south. Again, it's still believed that Ukraine is holding the high point of the quarry itself. So now, back up into the northeast, and let's go and have a look at then Kupiansk. So we see Kupiansk here, and what the Russians haven't been able to do is then move across the Oskil into Senkove. And today, Syriac suggesting that this may be happening. Northeastern Front Russian Army crossed the Oskil River and went west of Kurylivka and infiltrated inside Senkove. So looking like there potentially, say potentially, was a crossing in here. Now, this is what I call the Pishyani front. We need to zoom out. We see where Lozova is. Here, there's a small movement down to the southeast of here. What we're looking for is Nadia, sits in here. Syriac has been reporting on this for some time. Russian army made small advances west of Nadia. So out to the west here, that there's advances in this direction, of course. These maps around here can show vastly difference, especially between Pershotrevneve and Kopanki. Some say that Russians are in and occupy Kopanki. Some say they do not. Of course, we see this blue pop up here, which is new for today. Of course, what we reported last week, that the Russians were pushed back into then what I refer to as the Kupiansk forest. So let's have a look at this. This is lining up as well with Syriac, so we can confirm that happening. And then we have another map here. So just out then to the west, northwest of here, that the Russians made ground out here. So push back at one area and push somewhere else. This is war. At the end of the day, war is like an organism. You poke here, it'll push there, and it's moving around. And it could be the effect that we see in Kursk will be impacting all of this, and vice versa as well. We have seen as a number of Ukrainian attacks. Maybe those soldiers were pulled out of Kursk to attack another place, and that's why we're seeing Kursk then fall so quickly. But if Ukrainian forces do withdraw out of Kursk complete, the Russians will have two options: bolster Kursk and move into Sumy, or they redeploy all their forces back down to here as well. So either way, it's going to be some big decisions right on the bloody front of people's mind. So either way, I think we're about to see some big changes. Then right up in the northeastern pocket around Topoli, we have one last update from the Syriac maps that he's showing movement out through Topoli and as well north of Novomilyansk. The Russians have successfully crossed that Oskil, but again, we will wait and see. Legend, sorry if this was a bit monotone. I really probably wasn't up to this today. Look after yourselves, keep an eye on what is happening in Kursk, and I'll speak to you hopefully tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.